Hi, and good afternoon, and I'm delighted to be talking to you about consumer trends and their implications for seafood and meat. But of course, seafood is meat as far as consumers are concerned. It's just fish have fins rather than feet. But anyway, both are protein, and that's how I want to start. The big global megatrend is this move towards more protein. And if we take the first 2 decades of this century, then global protein consumption increased by 40%. That's huge. And what's more, over the next 5 years, it's expected to grow by a further 15%. Protein, though, is under a big umbrella, as far as I can see. Under the protein umbrella is plant-based, meat, eggs and dairy, aquaculture, wild catch fisheries, and non-traditional meats, the so-called fake meats. Believe it or not, plant-based proteins actually is the largest protein category in the world. That shouldn't be a surprise. After all, 1.4 billion Indians are largely vegetarian, and so for many people, protein is vegetables. Aquaculture actually is the fastest growing protein category, albeit from a relatively low base. Meat, eggs, and dairy are in very healthy growth. Remember, dairy is protein. Wild catch fish, you won't be surprised, has slowed down in terms of growth. That's got nothing to do with demand. It's got a lot to do with supply. And fish and seafood, you'll be pleased to know, is the largest single meat category. What do I mean by that? I mean that fish and seafood together are larger than, say, chicken, larger than, say, pork. So they're hugely influential in terms of overall global meat consumption. Non-traditional protein, this so-called fake meat, comes from an exceedingly small base, but it's growing spectacularly. Where is most protein consumed? Well, you won't be surprised. It's in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. Why there? Because that's where the people are. And what's more, go forward 10 years, 2/3 or more of the global population will be there. Where do you see the slowest growth in protein consumption? Actually, it's in aging Europe and Japan, where populations are static or sometimes declining. And anyway, because we're aging, we're tending to eat less. China, no surprise, consumes the world's largest total protein share and will continue to do so. Moving on. Look, let's take a look at chicken. You'd say, hey, this is about seafood. Well, but let's start with chicken. Actually, in the business world, we got used to global business disruptors. Amazon has wildly disrupted the retail scene. Suddenly we're ordering online. Uber has disrupted the Lyft, the personal transport scene. And there's Airbnb, which in a 10-year period, that's all it's been around, has got hundreds of thousands of rooms on its electronic platform available. It took Hilton 100 years to build 4,500 hotels. Airbnb has done it like in a long weekend. So what's chicken? What have we got to say about chicken? Well, it's a massive long-term disruptor in the US meat industry, for example. The US happens to be very high per capita consumers of meat. It's a good country to start in. And what do we see here? That from 1960, so over the last 60 years, it's been this consistent and tremendous growth of chicken consumption. Who's suffered? Well, you can see beef, the red line, is just sort of drifting down. What's happened to fish in the US? Relatively stable at relatively low levels. So why do I put this up? Because I just wonder, talking about plant-based meats and so-called cell-based meats, growing seafood from single cells, will we in 40 or 60 years be seeing a similar picture for them as we've seen for chicken? I don't know, but it's something I'll come back to in a minute. So moving on, why on earth would chicken be so successful? Is there anything we've got to learn from a fish and seafood perspective? Well, on the left-hand side, it's consumer checklists. All the consumer research I look at just tells me time and time again, because chicken is affordable, it's healthy, it's perceived to have good protein, it's versatile, it's snackable, it's easy to add taste. You can eat it hot and cold. Kids like it. It's a food service favorite. It's widely available. You can get it wherever you want it. It's often locally produced, or at least nationally produced. There's a wide product range. You get cheap chicken or very expensive chicken. And it's got a decent shelf life. And it's religion neutral. It doesn't offend many people. And when I looked at that from a consumer checklist for chicken point of view, so where do we score in terms of seafood, fish? And actually, on relatively few of these attributes. Clearly, we're healthy and nutritious. And what's more, the most. We've got excellent protein content and quality. And we are religious neutral. But for many of these, particularly the factors that pertain to snackability, to convenience, we fail to score heavily. But that's on the consumer checklist side. But increasingly what we're seeing worldwide is a citizen checklist, where consumers are saying, I want to be eco-active. I want to make food purchase decisions which are based on citizen issues and which make a difference, that make for a better world. So we start to see consumers thinking about climate-friendly food, environmentally friendly food, sustainable food, animal welfare friendly, and human health friendly. Does it have antibiotics? Does it have hormones? And again, whenever we look at where we stand competitively in the marketplace, I think we've got to look at the consumer checklist and the citizen checklist. Moving on, out of interest, just 3 weeks ago, I was in Canada and just passing a McDonald's and I saw this chicken for breakfast. Yes, please. And it reminded me, if you're looking to grow your market, just add another eating occasion. Can you imagine the impact on the chicken market if we all decide, yeah, let's have chicken for breakfast? Wow. Why not have fish for breakfast? Second big, and just harping on what I've already said, is this notion of climate-friendly or planet-friendly diets, which is gaining substantial traction. Now, who's driving this? I tell you who's driving. Talk to your children, talk to your grandchildren, because they're driving this. Look on the top right there. There's the Greta girl, the precocious, enormously influential Swedish girl. How old is she? 15, whatever. She is influential. She's also irritating from time to time, but there we go. She has a lot of supporters. So the drive towards sustainability, the drive towards climate-friendly foods is being driven not least by small children, but also, and here they are. Here's 2 examples, and they're a nightmare. In this particular case, they're my grandchildren. So the one on the top, First News, is her newspaper. She gets it once a week. Every week, it's covered on articles which relate to the environment and often about food. The one down the bottom right, Seraphine, she's 10. She's a nightmare. Whatever I buy in terms of food when I'm staying with them, it's grandfather, where did the fish come from? Is it sustainable? Who caught it, etc. They're a nightmare, but they're influential. We've got to take note of them. And what's more, they've got supporters. And who are their supporters? The UN. Plant-based diets, key in tackling climate change. Davos 2020, this is 3 weeks ago, again, the World Economic Forum saying, we need to have sustainable supply chains and agri-food system transformation. In my own country, in the UK, the government is saying we must cut meat and dairy intake by 1/5. And here we are on the right-hand side. In the European Parliament, in about a week, they're going to be debating whether there should be a tax on meat because of its environmental impact. Actually, in most cases, these don't relate to fish and seafood, and actually they put fish and seafood in rather a good place. Again, I'll come back to that. But what I notice in the wider scheme of things is how increasingly in international influential media, big stories on food are hitting headlines. They didn't used to, they are now. Whether it be about fake meat, more recently, for example, we've got the African swine fever and its impact on total supply of meat. When you take 20 million tons of pork out of the Chinese market, it will have an impact on prices for all proteins, whether they be fish, seafood, chicken, or whatever. But then down the bottom again, the UN report, 1 in 3 fish caught never makes it to the plate. So in the food industry, including the seafood industry, increasingly we're in the eye of the consumer and the eye of the citizen, and we have to take note of that. Moving on. So what's happening in Europe in meat? Well, actually, it's declining in most higher income European countries. We're buying it less frequently, and when we do buy it, we buy less. Although when we buy less, we prefer to buy better. Is that the same for fish? No, actually, per capita fish and seafood consumption is relatively stable. There's ups and downs within species, and as you know better than most, of course, the rise in interest in salmon, and then some of the traditional fishes starting to suffer from demand. But moving on. Okay, why? Why would Europeans elect to eat less meat? I've taken, these aren't Europeans, but I took some Australian data because I was recently there, and the results there reflect exactly the same in Europe. People are eating less meat, actually less red meat, because of They're concerned about their own health. They perceive that too much red meat is unhealthy. Secondly, they're concerned about the impact of red meat, particularly on the environment. They're concerned about animal welfare, and they're concerned about the cost. Again, how does that fit for seafood and fish? Actually, again, from an environmental point of view, is there a question mark? I think we've got to measure that. Have we got something to shout about? Would this be as useful as our health halo? I'll come back to it again. So on we move. How are we on the environment? And what I did here was to look at the relative greenhouse gas emission impact of selected protein foods. So all I did, I took beef, the villain, and put that at 100, and then measured all other proteins, or selected other proteins, I should say, against beef. Where did fish come? Actually, if beef is 100, farm fish about 9, wild fish 5. So on greenhouse gas emissions, fish is on the side of the angels, a clear competitive plus, I would suggest. But look what's happened over the last 12 months in markets right around the world. This is this frantic plant-based activity. And it'll take me 2 minutes just to go through about 20 companies. Carl Jr.'s, there's their vegan burger. Here's McDonald's launching the meaty big vegan burger in Germany. Who's making it? It's Nestle. McDonald's in Canada with their plant lettuce and tomato burger. The Impossible Whopper in the US, 100% Whopper, no percent beef. In Europe, the Rebel Whopper. Again, that's Burger King. Who's producing it? It's Unilever. It's a big deal. Even the Colonel is into this. He's going chickenless. And here we are, chickenless nuggets, for example, or chicken patties, which are made just from vegetables. Subway, we've all got our Subway, and with the garlic wraps, which are vegan. More of this. Dunkin', used to be Dunkin' and Donuts. Great taste, plant-based, etc. McDonald's joins the veganery craze by offering its first ever vegetarian Happy Meal for children in the UK. Hugely successful. Pizza Hut with its incognito sausage toppings. And who makes Incognito, a famous meat company? No, it's Kellogg's. And again, it's vegetarian based. It's astonishing. And what sort of concerns me for other real meat or real fish producers is how effective these major companies are in marketing their products. So here's the vegetarian butcher, which is owned by Unilever. They bought it from the Netherlands 2 years ago. And just look at how clever these products are. You know, they're naughty, but clever. What the cluck? Chickened out burger. And then it's a bit schoolboyish down the bottom. Little Peckers, Little Willies. The products are marketed so well and they're supported so well with promotion. And a lot of these new vegetarian-based foods, which are just advancing in sales in triple-digit figures. Why do they do well? Because they're great food products, because they look good, and they taste good. Here's Ball. You want to just buy those products. Ha! But you might say, that's only for land-based meats that are being copied. But there's a lot of fake fish about, I would suggest, and it is just starting to motor. And here's just a range of them. Just quick. Again, fish sauce made with organic seaweed, not fish. Moving on. Corn with its fishless fingers, with its 2 battered fishless fillets. Waitrose in my own market with vegan fishless cakes. Here's Tesco. They're just launching good to catch fish-free tuna. Moving on, the race is on to be the beyond meat of fish. Wild type debuts new cultured salmon. So this is growing salmon from single cells in the lab, if you will. Will that be on the market? Maybe not in my professional lifetime, but it will be a big deal within 10 years. Watch it. Tyson, one of the biggest food companies in the world, with plant-based shrimp, for example. Salmon, zero poisson, 100% goût. From France. Wherever I look, I see this. Wagamama in the UK, a great chain, launching vegan tuna made from watermelon, for goodness sake. And so we're going to have to live with this as we go forward. And here's UBS, a conservative Swiss bank, saying by the end of this decade, this market for fake meat will be 85 billion. Okay, let's leave that for the moment. What about the shoppers of the future? They're the shoppers of today too. They're short of time. They're more health conscious, they're more individual, they're more experimental, and they're more socially conscious. Moving on. And on megatrends, increasingly consumers are saying, tell me the story. I want to know where the ingredients come from. That's what they say when we say, why do you want to know the story? We want to know where it came from. Give us the full. How well do we tell our story in the seafood industry? Not well enough, I would suggest, because telling about origin, telling about provenance gives reassurance on quality and safety. What else? Look, particularly for young consumers, they're starting to break away from 3 meals a day, and it's more about mini meals or perhaps snacks, which could be healthy. And again, I wonder, to what extent are we taking advantage of this in the fish and seafood industry? I see increasingly meat snacks. Here we are with slow roasted chicken bites. Moy Park from Northern Ireland, pow, zap. These are chicken nuggets, if you will, to put in lunch boxes of school children. But then I'm intrigued when I see the likes of this in Thailand, salted egg, salmon skin, crispy salmon sold as a fish snack, brilliant. Or fish jerky, salmon jerky, chili salmon jerky, great products. But mind you, if you take those snacks and mini meals, perhaps the most successful in the world everywhere I go, and I go almost everywhere, it's sushi, it's fish-based, popular throughout the world. But I wonder, look what they've done with salmon. What's the opportunity for white fish? There must be one there. We're not taking advantage of it. What's our biggest advantage? It's clearly health. That of all the meats, the biggest halo is for fish, and that's just represented by every government that's trying to change diet. Here we are in the US, where they're saying, choose fish, poultry, if you're going to have healthy protein. Here we are in Belgium, we're on the upside down triangle, where don't eat less red meat, don't eat processed meat, but eat more fish, eat more chicken. So it's a real plus for us. But it's interesting what's happening with health, because again, particularly higher income people are saying, I'm going to use my diet, I'm going to come up with a diet that reflects who I want to be as a person. Do I want to be a great physically fit person, big muscles? I'll have this diet. Do I have a particular problem in terms of weight? Then I'll have this diet. Do I want a more Zen lifestyle? I'll have this diet. Or do I have a particular problem, like a heart problem? Then I'll have this diet. And what's more, we're using technology to find this out. So here we are. Here's Professor Chris Tamazu, who's from my university, Imperial College London, and he's got a DNA nudge. And what's that? That little machine up on the left there. You put one of those little things that you clean your ears with in your mouth, swab it around, pop it into his DNA nudge machine, and it sort of reads your DNA. And then when you're shopping for food, you take your DNA nudge and zap it against the UPC code of the food product, and it will tell you whether that food product is good for you or not. Is that magic? I don't think so, but I see it everywhere I go. Here's Sushi Singularity from Japan, where in a particular restaurant, open meals, you send a sample of your DNA, and then 2 weeks later, you go to have a 3D printed sushi with seafood, with particular food that meets your DNA requirements. It looks high-tech, it is high-tech, but it's coming our way. And what's more, consumers want to know more about what is the impact on the product on my health. You can see big food companies are saying, let's take the Nutri-Score labeling and put it on every food product. I think we should be putting that on seafood and fish products because we'd score well. But what's more, I see this coming big time, is an Enviro score, that we're saying, how does this product, what impact does this product have on the environment? What impact does this product have on global warming, on climate change, etc.? And I think for seafood and for fish, it will be positive. Let's put it on the pack. Moving on. And is it coming? Yes, it's coming. It's already happening. Here's Tesco and the World Wildlife Fund already calling for this, an Enviro score, an environmental, a climate-friendly score to be put on food products. That would help us, I would suggest. And there are already products like Quorn and Oatly doing that. So you've got this eco-active consumer, this increasingly who are consumers who tend to be higher income, but that probably puts 20% of most Europeans. So for example, on this here, 20% of Swedes and Danes take into account what they're buying on the impact they think that product might have on the environment. And again, I think that helps us in the fish and seafood business because people are concerned about sustainability. How well are you telling your fish story again? 70% of seafood consumers say they'd like to hear more from companies about the sustainability of their seafood. and they're worried about pollution and overfishing, etc. And you can see it's not, there are so many elements, these social issues. France to tax non-recycled plastic packaging. What's that reflecting? Consumer concerns about the detrimental impact of plastic on their environment, on the, not least, the oceans in which we fish. And what they don't like, similar sort of thing here, consumers are increasingly saying, don't be wasteful. There's some good examples that don't relate to fishing here. For example, McDonald's are working with Ford to turn the coffee waste into car parts. Or down the bottom here, Planet Saving Brewing, where a brewer is taking the bread from bakers that isn't sold and converting it into beer. It's an on trend. This, are we reusing everything? Are we recycling everything? And I think we've got issues here clearly on the upcycling of fish waste. We need to do better. And so you get this social pressure dictating choice. Remind me again what we can't eat. Of course, anything with palm oil, because why palm oil? What about the orangutans? But chicken that's been fed soy from Brazil. Fish that's unsustainably sourced. Fish with a poor bycatch track record. Shrimps caught by slave labor in Asia. Fish with excessive food miles. It's these social pressures, and some of them are right in our heartline, and we have to fix them, I would suggest. And I see back to this of international media covering these sort of issues. This was 2 weeks ago in the Economist, how artificial shrimps can change the world. Why? Because the perception is, particularly for warm water shrimps, that it is related to both slavery and environmental destruction. These are big issues for us, and we have to put the mind of consumers at rest. Because consumers want to know where their food comes from, who caught it, how it was caught, where it was caught, how it was processed. And actually, in the food industry, in their wider sense, what we see is this move towards using technology like blockchain technology so that we have transparency and traceability throughout the supply chain. And in most cases, I think we're quite good at that in seafood and fish. And also, I think, here we have got a great natural product, and we just don't take the advantage we should. Here's Mars, the confectionery people, just with their kind snack bars. They're celebrating the fact that it has very simple ingredients, and ingredients that you can pronounce. You need to do that if you're going to put them in your mouth. And I'm just suggesting here, on every pack of fish, I'd put ingredients, haddock, make more noise about our provenance and simplicity. And so this move towards sustainability, it's a big deal, whether it be so the greenness, the greening, if you will, of the food industry is huge, and it is consumer citizen driven. Unilever at the front in doing this. And why are they doing it along with Danone? Because in most cases they find that their investment in social good pays off for their business. I was working recently with Barilla, the great pasta manufacturer and cookie manufacturer from Italy. They're heavy into it in sustainability of agriculture, etc. It is, whether you're on land or on sea, sustainability has to be at the core of your business, I would suggest. And what's more, the banking industry is starting to accept this too. Green finance is now a 31 trillion business and growing. Just use one example here, Maple Leaf Foods, I'm Canadian as well as a Brit, with their deal that they've just cut with the Bank of Montreal. The Bank of Montreal is saying, we will reduce your interest rates on your corporate loan if you hit certain trigger points that relate to sustainable development goals. It's starting to make business sense. Almost done. A few final summary thoughts. Seafood, particularly fish, has the largest and the brightest health halo in the world of meat protein. But you need to cultivate an eco-friendly, a planet-friendly halo to accompany this, not least addressing overfishing, pollution, bycatch waste, energy use. Consumers want to know the story behind the seafood they buy. The provenance gives reassurance on quality and safety. You need to add to their pleasure by giving them a story and by removing their guilt. Take a good look at the factors that have driven success for chicken. In the North Atlantic, you're not about to try and out-chicken chicken. Leave that to Vietnam. If you're not in the Pangasius, the Bassa business. But plant-based meat competitors are strongly consumer-focused, and going forward, there'll be a real competitor to you. The wider meat industry, including fish, have a supply push background. A health halo is trumped by convenience. Consumers want seafood that is convenient to buy, to prepare, to consume, and dispose of the remains and the packaging. I think you've got brilliant products, but you've got a lot of work to do. And thanks very much for listening. Good afternoon.